Hello, students. Here we are at the beginning of week 9 of visual communication. And I want to start off by talking about one item in visual communication in the news. And it was something in, I think, Sunday's New York Times. And it says, "Are you really in love if it's not on Instagram?" And it was a fairly humorous article about someone who is not pleased with their friends who seem to update their lovey-dovey relationship on a very regular basis on Instagram. And so it brings up an interesting point about visual communication and sharing and the affordances of that particular medium. Um, I have not kept up with my um, log of the visual affordances of social media. I will try to make good on that maybe tomorrow. But one of the things that I have been paying close attention to is all the news about Facebook. And so if you follow the news at all, you realize that there are a couple big events, including a piece of video journalism made by Channel 4 in Britain about Cambridge Analytica and how they used the Facebook data from 50 million users to help the Trump campaign in their efforts to win the 2016 election. So a lot of people have been utterly appalled about this violation of their privacy. I happen to believe that I never really thought that I had much privacy on Facebook or anywhere else. And so I understand that when you get something for free, such as Facebook, then you are the product. And so information about me is the product. And what I get is sort of, get to use Facebook. So my older brother, he was so appalled by this violation of his privacy that he quit Facebook. I'm tempted to because of that, but it turns out just this past week I attended 3 different social events that were actually organized by students or former students of mine that I wouldn't have known about if I weren't on Facebook. So I'm kind of torn. I am certainly going to stay on Facebook a little while longer, but might eventually decide that I have to leave because of the way that they have not done anything like due diligence to protect my privacy. All right, so that's visual communication news. I want to talk a little bit about your visual analysis essays. I sent an announcement that I had completed the grading, and one of the things I pointed out was that the difference between good and very good, it really had to do with the quality of writing. I thought you all chose excellent opportunities in terms of the images that you chose to analyze. And you may recall that some time ago I pointed out that the word theory comes from the Greek theorein, which is to look at or to view. So that basically a theory is a way of looking at something. So most of you used Lester's 6 perspectives. Some people combine that then with some theory of typography, particularly stuff coming from the Goodhart Wilcox text. And so one of the things I noted is that there's an old saying, every picture tells a story. And so each one of these pictures that you chose, there was a story behind it. And one of the things that the theory allowed you to do was tell a kind of interesting and coherent story. And again, the more coherent the essay in terms of you proceeded in an orderly fashion from one aspect to another, and also the more sort of careful the editing of the prose at the surface level, at the sentence level, and the paragraph level, make for better stories or stories that are a little harder to follow. But what that then connects to is the readings that we had for last week, and one of them was visual manipulation in mass media. So we actually had 3 different examples of propaganda. We had the U.S. propaganda produced in World War II to support the war effort, and so that was stuff that some of you are probably already familiar with. And if you looked at it, you'd say, okay, this is kind of good stuff. This is doing something we want to be doing. And then there was the propaganda film by the Third Reich. And if you spend any time looking at the parts of that I had identified, you could say it's like, wow, I can see how this is very powerful. And it really has to do with these visual images. You have images of German culture, and you have images of military strength and religious sort of devotion, and health and fitness and hygiene, and all these ideas that the filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl was able to communicate in a story that is largely just a collection of images. We are soon going to be moving into visual communication that moves. So that was sort of a nice way to get into it. And then finally, there was that collection of political cartoons that were anti-communist cartoons in different countries, former Soviet satellite countries, just as the Soviet Union was falling apart. So those three different approaches to propaganda, I hope, gave you sort of a sense of, there were some commonalities there in terms of what it is that someone who has a message that they want to communicate, the pictures that they pick, and the reliance upon certain symbols, that the audience for those pictures would understand the symbol of a family sitting down to Thanksgiving dinner as symbolic of freedom from want, etc. So I hope you were able to gain some understanding of the way propaganda worked in those three different connections. The other reading, Perception and Memory, I'm not going to talk about much because you have a quiz on it. It's not due until Wednesday of this week. But the whole idea, if we go back to the first week, one of the things that was in the reading, and it was on one of the first quizzes, was, okay, the behaviorist notion of vision, that a stimulus comes into our eye and then we respond to it, clearly is not adequate to the complexity of what's going on. And so then one of the things that is going on is we are constructing stories. And then one of the most interesting things of recent research is that we are constructing stories almost instantaneously. Within a nanosecond of perceiving it, we are remembering it, but we're not remembering it correctly. We are misremembering it within a nanosecond of perceiving it. So it's not just the case that every picture tells a story, but we are in the business of making stories based upon who we are. So what we bring to something we see is rather significant. So depending upon your ethnicity, your race, your religious beliefs, your background, the family that you grew up in, you're going to bring those things to anything you see. And then you're going to write the story of what you saw. And so then the whole notion of objective observation, that somehow you would have an unbiased interpretation of what you saw, gets a little bit problematic. Okay, so visual design project number 3. It's in this module. You'll be able to click on it and see what it is. And so this time now you are going to do something that involves motion media, motion graphics. So in the assignment, you can see that you can do this with a PowerPoint, with a narrated PowerPoint. You can do it. I used a thing called, I can't remember what it's called, but you'll see the example that I've made in there. Or you can shoot video. So I suggested in the assignment, in past years, people doubled up and formed teams. And that was handy if they're shooting video, because then you got one person operating the camera and the other person maybe being the on-camera talent. Because this is an online class, and I don't know to what degree any of you actually know each other or are in classes with each other, that might be kind of challenging. But if I can do anything to support you, pairing up with somebody else, let me know. Short of that, you might have a family member who could operate the camera if you're choosing to use video. But again, you don't have to use video. But there are, not in the samples that I have attached to the assignment, but I'll show you some samples of what, oh no, there is one, what's his name? The Swiss tennis star, Roger Federer, slow motion of his serve. So both slow motion or speeded up motion are ways that you can use moving images to communicate something, okay? So that assignment is not due for, it's almost 3 weeks, I think April 16th. So then we've got 3 other parts of this module: visual communication and interactive media. So I assigned a kind of short theoretical article, but it's very dense. And very quickly into the article, the author referred to another theoretical article, which is fairly dense. And so in years past, I realized this stuff is kind of challenging. So what I did was I created a PowerPoint that explains some of the ideas in these two readings. And then a year or two ago, I actually videotaped myself delivering that PowerPoint. So you have access to PDFs of the articles. You have a PowerPoint explaining the articles. And one of the things I often do in PowerPoint is I put a lot of stuff in the notes pages. Well, in this case, there's not much in the notes pages. So the stuff that's not in the notes pages, you can actually see me by watching the video. Now, the video was the first portion of a 3-hour class, so the video runs 59 minutes. One of the great things about videos on YouTube is you can watch them at a faster speed. So depending upon how fast you can tolerate me talking, you could actually watch that video in as few as 30 minutes. So the two articles are Visual Communication in Interactive Media and the 3 paradigms of HCI, that's Human Computer Interaction. And then after that, I go to Steve Krug, a web design expert, author of Don't Make Me Think. And then he's talking about skeuomorphs. You'll figure out what they are from a Canvas page, and flat design. And Steve is a rather entertaining presenter. So in the video of me giving a lecture, in that lecture, I'm showing the relevant Steve Krug video. So I think you'll enjoy that. And then it ends up with a page and a chapter from Luke Wroblewski on web design. Luke Wroblewski is now a sort of a product designer at Google, and he's worked his way up to that through being sort of a bigwig, a web design savant for some of the premier tech companies in the recent past. So that's all that's in this week's agenda. I'm going to save this now, post it, and put it as the intro to the weeknight agenda, and also intro on the front page. Within a short period, I am going to update my visual affordances of social media and talk a little bit more about the problem of Facebook and violations of people's privacy. And then I will actually give you a link to, I have a page, a Wix page, that I've used for several years. And it's a mess of a page because I only use it as a landing spot so that I can go find the links that I most frequently use. But I actually cleaned it up a little bit, and so I'll direct you to that. And so you can see one of the things that is true now is that you can make rather remarkable web pages using something like Wix because of the functionality they have built into it, and it can be totally free. If you want to pay, then you can have it where it's not basically advertising Wix to everybody who comes to your page. But I think you'll see some of the things that I was able to do in Wix to make my page interactive, even though years ago, let's see how many years ago, probably 2005, like 13 years ago, I was pretty good at using Dreamweaver to make websites, but not interactive websites. They're kind of like Web 1.0 rather than Web 2.0. Well, with Wix, you can go Web 2.0, probably Web 3.0, depending upon what that might mean to you. So I will give you a link to that. So that's the end of the intro for today, and I look forward to being in touch with you again soon.